Okay, so this is the HEDD Audio D1, and it's an open back dynamic driver headphone that I've been more excited to talk about than just about anything else this year. The story here is that deep in the mountains of somewhere in Germany, there exists a man by the name of Dimitri who has taken it upon himself to give the people what they want, to give the people the D1. While everybody else is out here chasing target curves or unique and esoteric design concepts, this one guy has taken it upon himself to actually deliver on something that many of us have been wanting for years. This is effectively an HD 600 combined with a Focal Elexir Clear with the mechanical design of an HD 490 Pro. And if you're familiar with those headphones, you will know exactly why this is so exciting. And in today's video, that's what we're going to talk about. So let's get going with the review. Before I get going, disclaimer time. And this is a bit different from my usual disclaimers. This is a headphone that I did have a little bit of input on earlier on in its development. Now, this isn't a collab or anything like that, and I don't get paid for any of this. They just sent me a prototype back in April of this year asking for feedback. I provided them with that feedback, but I just want to be upfront and transparent with you guys that that is where my bias lies with this product. So be sure to check out the reviews from others on this before making any kind of purchase decision. And one other thing, there will be a review article up on headphones.com by Griffin. And speaking of headphones.com, they're the ones who make all these videos possible. So if you like what we do here, consider checking out headphones.com the next time you're in the market for a new pair of headphones or audio equipment. So let's get going with the review here, starting with the design, the build, and the comfort. Aesthetically, this looks a lot more engineering focused rather than the artsy kinds of designs that you find in the higher end audiophile world. It's a very functional, utilitarian, understated headphone looking headphone. And I like that. It's very black, and with a product like this, you have to ask yourself, how much more black can it get? And the answer is none. None more black.
None
Is that good?
more black.
But yeah, if you guys know the kind of visual styles that I like, you'll know this is exactly the kind of thing that speaks to me. It is the most headphone, and that's a good thing. Now, there's one fun little visual piece of flair here. HEDD Audio is known for their AMT driver designs. AMT is, of course, their unique in-house air motion transfer driver technology that they do. This is not that. This is a dynamic driver in here, but they were able to get that AMT-looking part for the grille, so that it is a little bit reminiscent of their AMT heritage. Now, for the mechanical design, this is also exactly what we want. You get cup swivel here that's backstopped on either side, so you don't have a freely spinning cup. You get very satisfying clicks to the headband extension. Underneath for this headband pad, you get these two foam pieces. I feel these foam pieces could be a little bit softer. They're a little bit on the firm side. You don't notice them after you initially put them on, but the initial placement on top of the head, you do notice that right away. The pads are extremely soft and cushiony, very compliant for the foam. And the pad material is this cloth-like, suede-like kind of material that's porous as well, very breathable and very compliant, as I said. For the pad opening, it is large enough for my larger than average ears. I don't have any issues with my ear touching the inside of the baffle here, but if you have sticky outy ears, that might be something that you notice. I'm aware of at least one other person where this did actually happen, but for me, it's not a problem at all. When you wear the headphone, there's enough space here to accommodate, larger heads like mine, no problem. It doesn't clamp too hard at all. It's super comfortable. It's a lightweight design at around 350 grams. But one thing to note here is that the sound is actually influenced here by how much pad compression there is, and I will show you guys the differences here in a moment. But essentially, the more pad compression there is, the more bass there is, and the less treble there is. So that is going to be one source of variation for how this is received. The pads are removable, but when you do remove the pads, make sure that you hold on to the pad ring, not just to pull the leather piece off the ring, because there's a risk that you could damage the pads by doing that. So for anybody who wants to replace the pads, don't just pull on the pad here, hold it from the inside of the pad ring, and then it should just snap off. The underside of the headband piece is also replaceable here, but if you want to do that, make sure that you pull on the actual clips themselves rather than the padded piece. Now, one other nice touch here is they designed this intentionally so that it could be user serviceable. So you can see that all the screw holes here are exposed and easy to access. So if for whatever reason you break the headband or something wears out over time, you should have an easy time replacing that part. This is the kind of thing that companies like Sennheiser and Meze have done as well, and it's always nice to see. For accessories, you get this nice compact case and a cable that is understated but super functional and not tangly and springy, and it's just a good cable. I like it. Okay, let's talk sound quality here. And there's a lot to go over with this. The driver that they use in here, as I mentioned, it's a dynamic driver. The claim to fame here is supposed to be that this is in collaboration with Composite Sound, which is a company out of Sweden that makes these unique thin ply carbon diaphragms. That's the material for the driver story going on here. I actually got a chance to chat with the folks at Composite Sound at Munich High End this past year as well. I didn't know that they were working on this together with HEDD Audio at the time, but I remember being kind of fascinated by what they were doing there. Essentially, their goals are to create a driver structure where it controls the modal behavior to be more linear on the driver's side rather than having this be part of the acoustic design for the rest of the headphone, so that there's less damping required after the fact. While the driver story stuff is interesting, the real focus here needs to be on the actual performance of the product as it is instantiated. And that's what I want to talk about next. My hope here is that this kind of modal control on the driver side becomes a trend, because I think that that would make it much easier for a lot of companies to make awesome sounding headphones. So how does that actually sound? For the overall sound signature here, I find this to be a mostly very neutral presentation with just like a hint of flair towards either end. This is a balance that shifts a little bit more towards the treble than what you got on like a HD6XX, so it doesn't have quite that sort of like warm and thick kind of presentation that has. This has a little bit more of that sort of breath of fresh air kind of quality to it, more reminiscent of the HD600 than the HD6XX, just notably more well extended down low. Now, of course, people are going to want to know about the soundstage or the spaciousness effect. I don't like to talk about this stuff because I feel this is a red herring, but if you're wondering if it has that kind of like intimate, in your eyeballs kind of sound that the HD6 series has, again, no, this doesn't have that. The shape of that treble presentation is a bit different here. So the subjective qualities that stand out to me with this one, timbre, incisiveness, and that sense of hard-hitting physicality that you get from some of the focals. But again, this does not mean that it is a bass boosted or bass elevated headphone. This is a neutral presentation across the board with just like a hint of flair on either end. Now, let's take a look at the measurements here. This is the frequency response measured on the B&K 5128 with 10 seatings per side. And you can see here, this is the positional variation for this headphone on this one particular head. And this is, of course, an open back headphone, so it's not going to have the kinds of crazy leakage effects you get from closed backs. There is also going to be a difference to do with the pad compression. Here you can see as I increase the clicks, which increases the clamp pressure and pad compression, with the same seating, it increases the bass overall. You can think of it like this: if you have a larger than average head, you are likely to get a little bit more bass than the average measurement for this headphone. But let's go back to the frequency response here. This is a very neutral performing, neutral measuring headphone. You have a little bit of a forward contour there for the low frequencies, more well extended and a little bit bassier than the HD6 series, but again, not bass boosted. If you're looking for a bass boosted headphone, you would want to look elsewhere, or you would want to do EQ. For the mids, things are great. This is some of the best mid-range you'll be able to find in any headphone, period. For the ear gain and the treble, there's a bit of a forwardness there at like 3.5 kilohertz. I don't find this nearly as noticeable, and that's probably just because of the relationship with the rest of the treble above it, which is also very present and well balanced throughout the mid treble. So in this situation, there is maybe a little bit of extra upper treble going on for this headphone. Like, I think there's a small peak at around 10.5K, but I find it to be decently balanced with the mid treble. And that's the thing, I'm not as sensitive to upper treble when there is a decent mid treble balance as well, so that the focus and balance for cymbal hits and percussive hits remains intact. So what does this sound like? I mentioned this like a long time ago in one of the live streams that I did, but one of the very first like proper audiophile headphones that I ever listened to and loved was the Hi-Fi Man HE500. And the reason I loved it was because it gave me this really strong sense of completeness. It was just, everything was there with the music, right? I could hear all parts of the music in a complete manner. Like, it wasn't perfect, literally no headphone is perfect, but I got that sense of like, okay, I'm hearing all of the music, everything. And that's the feeling that I get with this headphone. So for the music that I listen to the most, like instrumental music, jazz music, acoustic music, this is some of the best sound quality, period. Now, I will do some direct comparisons here in a moment, but I want to talk about a couple of other things first. There is a bit of an impedance bump to do with this headphone in the bass, similar to what you get with some of those focals as well. It's not uncommon. This one does not seem to have the kind of excursion limit issues that you had with some of those, like the Clear and the Alex. They all have an excursion limit at 107 dB, which is extremely loud, but those headphones are not going to pair as well with higher output impedance devices like certain tube amplifiers, or if people want to EQ the bass up, they're going to lower the volume threshold where those headphones would clip. This one doesn't have this problem. So here's how it behaves when run off of a higher output impedance source. For reference, this is the Amps and Sound Kenzie. This is just doubling down on some of the more euphonic characteristics of the headphone. Just be careful not to go too high on the output impedance because you'll also boost the upper treble by a tiny bit. But speaking of harmonic distortion, if you do blast it at like 115 dB or something crazy like that, you do start to see some low order stuff showing up, but nobody's going to listen that loud. And importantly, even at 115 dB, this does not hit the excursion limit. So for anybody who wants to boost the bass to the high heavens and turn this into a bass cannon, you should be able to do that. I'm not saying you should do that, but you could do that. And speaking of EQ, there are certain types of music that I do like to listen to with a bass boost for this one, and it handles it no problem. The only other thing that you might want to consider for EQ here is the 3.5 kilohertz, 3.4 kilohertz bump that it has, but I don't think this is a headphone that needs EQ by any means. Okay, let's get into the comparisons now. So here it is relative to the Sennheiser HD600. You can see that the HD600 actually has a bit more upper treble in a couple of spots. This is with fresh pads on the HD600. Things do get more relaxed in the treble as the pads wear in for those headphones. But of course, the big advantage for the D1 here is in the better bass performance. Here it is relative to the Focal LX. It has some similar features there throughout the ear gain and throughout the treble, but then also for the bass contour, it's pretty similar there too. I do think that the Focal Clear and the LX are still maybe a little bit more bass focused than this, but that's also partially due to the rest of the balance overall. The contour itself, like the bass shape and the bass contour, is pretty similar between these headphones. And another headphone that folks might be considering is the Focal HEDD or HEDD. That one actually has more bass. So again, if you're looking for a more bass boosted headphone, the HEDD might be the better choice here, but I also think the D1 has a better sense of timbre for the rest of its response. Now, compared to the Sennheiser HD490 Pro, this is where the D1 has a much better mid-range presentation overall. And also, I think the treble here is a little bit more refined. The HD490 Pro also has very good bass extension, but again, that one has a bit more of a dip there in the mids, whereas the D1 is more linear. The mechanical design and the comfort's pretty similar between the two for those, but it's the sound really where I think the D1 wins. Compared to the Sony MDR MV1, this is a more V-shaped kind of sound with a bit of an emphasis towards the bass and then also to the treble. You can see there's a peak at around 6 kilohertz there for the MV1, but this is one that also has a very linear mid-range performance. So remember when I talked about that more modal control that this driver is trying to go for? You can also achieve that with other types of designs too. Now, compared to the HiFiMan Aria Stealth, the D1 is going to be a lot more balanced throughout the treble. It's not going to have those, treble clangies and zingies going on up there. One thing to note though, for all those folks who are chasing the soundstage thing or the spaciousness effect at their peril, the Aria Stealth is still going to be a headphone that does that kind of thing because it has those colorations, right? Similar to the way that the HD800S performs. It's that same kind of shifting of the sound towards the treble away from the primary ear gain band that creates this kind of spaciousness element, and both the Aria Stealth and the HD800S do this. So for the people who are specifically looking for those colorations because you want that soundstage effect, the Aria Stealth is going to do that more than the D1, but that's also going to involve these meaningful colorations that you see. And this is where the D1 doesn't have this issue whatsoever. And lastly, compared to the HiFiMan HE600, which is more Sundara-like than it is HE6-like, and also is a decently balanced sounding headphone, I find the HE600's lower treble to be just a little bit on the edge of glaring for me, whereas with the D1, I don't have this issue whatsoever. And so the D1, I think, is more versatile. It also has a better sense of physicality down low because this has that sort of contour shape towards the low frequencies, whereas the HE600 is basically just flat until it tapers off. So regardless of the ergonomics or the build quality or anything like that, the D1 is still, to me, the better sounding headphone. So let me give you guys a conclusion here. I don't think the D1 is going to be the right headphone for everybody. In fact, I know there are going to be people who prefer the Clear or the LX or the HD6XX even. Or, maybe somebody is like, I really want a lot more bass and treble and more V-shape or whatever. When you consider that all those other qualities require various compromises to the sound in one area or another, or limit versatility in some way, it's extremely difficult to find any other headphone that compromises less than this. And for that reason, this is one of the strongest recommendations I can give to a product this year. And that's going to do it for this video. As always, if you want to find any additional measurements, that's at forum.headphones.com, where other folks are going to be chiming in on the D1 as well. And if you want to chat with me or other like-minded audio folks, you can do so in a Discord linked below. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye for now.